A strong GRE score can open the door to better universities, scholarships, and career opportunities, but one common mistake can cost you valuable points before you even realize it. If you do not understand the GRE structure, scoring system, and question strategy, you may spend hours studying without getting the results you want. In this complete GRE exam prep study guide, we will go through all 6 sections step by step and focus on the knowledge and strategies you actually need for the exam. In this first section, we will build your foundation and cover the GRE structure, scoring, and analytical writing assessment, including how to write a strong analytical essay under time pressure. Make sure you watch the complete video because every section builds on the previous one, and I will also share a free GRE study guide with the most important questions and preparation tips in the description. So stay with me until the end, because I will show you a simple and practical way to prepare for the GRE and give yourself a much better chance of passing the exam with confidence. Now, take a deep breath, and let us begin. The Graduate Record Examination, commonly known as the GRE, is a standardized test used for admission into graduate schools and business programs across the world. Think of it as a common measuring stick that admissions committees use to compare applicants from very different academic backgrounds. The test is designed to measure your verbal reasoning, quantitative reasoning, and analytical writing skills. These are the broad cognitive abilities that you have developed over your lifetime, rather than specific subject knowledge. Knowing this helps you realize that the GRE tests how you think, not just what you have memorized. One of the most important things to understand about the GRE is its section-level adaptive format. This means the computer adjusts the difficulty of your second verbal or quantitative section based on how well you perform in the first one. If you do very well on the first math section, the second math section will be harder, but it will also offer you access to much higher score brackets. Conversely, if you struggle early on, the next section gets easier, but your maximum possible score is capped. This is why giving your absolute best effort on the very first sections is crucial for achieving a top score. The overall structure of the modern GRE is now significantly shorter than in previous years, taking under 2 hours to complete. You will face 1 analytical writing section, followed by 2 verbal reasoning sections and 2 quantitative reasoning sections. This condensed time frame means you do not have to worry as much about mental endurance, but you do need to focus heavily on speed and accuracy. There are no scheduled breaks in this new format, so you need to be prepared to sit down and focus intently from start to finish. You can think of this exam like an intense mental sprint rather than a long marathon. The scoring system for the GRE is uniquely scaled to help universities understand your percentile ranking among other test takers. Both the verbal and quantitative sections are scored on a scale from 130 to 170, moving in 1-point increments. The analytical writing section is scored differently, using a scale from 0 to 6, in half-point increments. When you see your final score report, you will also see a percentile rank next to each number, which simply tells you the percentage of students you scored higher than. Aiming for high percentiles is the ultimate goal when targeting competitive graduate programs. Now that we understand the test structure, let us transition to the very first task you will face on test day, which is the analytical writing assessment. You will be given exactly 30 minutes to complete 1 essay task called the Analyze an Issue task. In this section, the examiners want to see how well you can articulate a complex idea, support it with relevant examples, and maintain a focused and coherent discussion. You are not being tested on your specific knowledge of world events, but rather on your ability to argue a point logically. Keep your focus on clear reasoning and strong paragraph structure. The Analyze an Issue task presents you with a brief statement expressing a specific opinion on a topic of general interest. You will be asked to read this prompt and then write an essay indicating the extent to which you agree or disagree with the claim. Crucially, you must also follow a set of specific instructions that usually ask you to consider the circumstances under which the statement might or might not hold true. It is incredibly important that you actually address these specific instructions, rather than just writing a generic essay on the broad topic. Failing to answer the specific prompt is a very common trap that lowers many candidate scores. When choosing your position on the issue, remember that there is no strictly right or wrong answer that the human graders and computer algorithms are looking for. You can strongly agree, strongly disagree, or take a balanced, nuanced approach somewhere in the middle. The best strategy is always to choose the side that you can defend most easily with strong, clear examples. Do not waste precious time trying to figure out what you truly believe in your heart. Just pick the side that gives you the best material to write about quickly. Your job is to demonstrate strong argumentative skills, not to solve real-world problems. Because you only have 30 minutes, you must spend the first 3 to 5 minutes outlining your essay before you type a single sentence. During this brief planning phase, you should quickly decide your main thesis statement and jot down 2 or 3 strong examples to support it. Many students panic and start typing immediately, which often leads to a messy, disorganized essay that loses track of its main point. A quick mental map or a few notes on your scratch paper will keep your writing smooth and logical. This small investment of time at the beginning will save you from getting stuck halfway through your essay. A high-scoring GRE essay generally follows a classic, easy-to-read structure consisting of 4 to 5 paragraphs. You should always start with a clear introduction, follow it with 2 or 3 robust body paragraphs, and finish with a brief conclusion. This traditional framework is highly effective because it makes it incredibly easy for the grader to follow your train of thought. Remember, graders are reading hundreds of these essays rapidly, so a predictable, clean structure works strongly in your favor. Make their job easy, and they will naturally reward you with a higher score. Your introduction paragraph only needs to accomplish 3 main goals to be highly effective. First, introduce the general topic with a broad opening sentence to set the stage for your reader. Second, clearly state your specific thesis, which is your direct answer to the prompt and the specific instructions provided. Finally, provide a brief roadmap sentence that tells the reader what specific examples you will use to prove your thesis. Keep the introduction concise and punchy, so you can save your valuable time and energy for the body paragraphs where the real points are earned. The body paragraphs are the absolute core of your analytical writing score, as this is where you actually prove your argumentative skills. Each body paragraph should focus entirely on one primary example or reason that supports your main thesis. You must explicitly explain exactly how and why your example proves your point, rather than just dropping a historical fact and moving on. A good rule of thumb is to spend more time analyzing your example than you spend describing it. Depth of critical analysis is always rewarded much more heavily than the sheer number of examples you try to cram into your essay. When selecting examples to use in your body paragraphs, try to draw from history, literature, science, or current events. These types of academic or real-world examples generally look more professional and are easier to analyze deeply than personal anecdotes about your friends or family. For instance, using the Industrial Revolution to talk about technological progress is usually stronger than talking about buying a new smartphone. However, if your mind goes completely blank on test day, a well-analyzed personal hypothetical example is still much better than having no example at all. Always prioritize strong logic over obscure factual knowledge. To truly push your essay into the highest scoring brackets, you should try to include an element of nuance or a concession point. This means acknowledging that the opposing viewpoint might have some minor validity in certain specific situations, before ultimately proving why your main position is still stronger overall. Adding nuance shows the graders that you are a mature thinker who understands that real-world issues are rarely simple black and white choices. You can handle this gracefully in your final body paragraph by exploring a minor exception to your own rule. This simple writing technique elevates your work from good to truly outstanding. Your conclusion paragraph should be the shortest part of your essay, requiring only 2 or 3 simple sentences to wrap things up. Its only job is to quickly restate your main thesis in slightly different words and briefly summarize the core reasons you discussed in your body paragraphs. Never introduce brand new arguments or new evidence in your conclusion, as this confuses the reader and severely weakens your overall structure. Simply tie a neat bow on your argument and provide a clear sense of finality to your essay. If you are ever running out of time, at least type a single sentence summarizing your final stance. A very common mistake students make is writing completely isolated paragraphs that do not flow smoothly from one to the next. You need to use clear transition words and phrases, such as furthermore, conversely, or as a result, to organically link your ideas together. These transitions act as signposts for the grader, showing him exactly how your thoughts are logically connected from the introduction all the way to the conclusion. Using strong transition words helps the computer grading algorithm recognize that you have constructed a cohesive, integrated argument. Smooth flow makes the entire essay read like a polished, professional academic paper. While the GRE is mostly testing your reasoning, your vocabulary and grammar still play an important role in the analytical writing assessment. You do not need to use extremely obscure dictionary words to impress the graders, but you should strive for precise vocabulary that clearly expresses your exact meaning. Avoid using repetitive phrasing, and try to vary your sentence structures by mixing short, punchy sentences with longer, complex ones. While minor spelling and grammar mistakes will not ruin your score, consistent errors that make your writing hard to understand definitely will. Always try to leave 2 minutes at the very end just to proofread your work. It is also highly important to understand the actual testing software you will be using to write your essay on exam day. The GRE word processor is very basic, deliberately lacking advanced modern features like spell check, grammar check, or autocorrect. You can cut, paste, and undo text, but you must rely entirely on your own eyes to catch typing mistakes or missing punctuation. This is why practicing your typing speed and accuracy on a standard desktop keyboard before test day is absolutely vital. You want your brain entirely focused on building your argument, not fighting with a clumsy typing interface. Ultimately, conquering the analytical writing section comes down to having a clear, reliable template in your mind before the exam timer even starts. By knowing exactly how many paragraphs you will write, how to structure your thesis, and how to deploy your examples, you remove the immense stress of having to invent a format on the fly. You can simply plug your fresh ideas into your pre-built framework and type confidently. Mastering this highly structured approach will ensure you always produce a clear, convincing essay, regardless of what surprising or difficult topic the prompt throws your way. Congratulations on completing the first section of our GRE prep course and building your foundational knowledge of the exam and the analytical essay. I strongly encourage you to complete the practice test attached to this lesson, where you can write a sample issue essay under real-timed conditions. Applying what you just learned through practice questions is the absolute best way to improve your long-term retention and guarantee your exam readiness. This realistic practice test is included right here with this lesson, so take full advantage of it to activate your active learning skills. Keep up this excellent momentum, and I look forward to seeing you in the next section where we will tackle the core skills of verbal reasoning. Welcome to the second section of our GRE exam prep course, where we will master verbal reasoning core skills and text completion. In this lesson, you will learn how to quickly decode complex sentences and build a powerful vocabulary using root words and structural clues. Mastering these foundational reading skills is critical because the verbal section heavily tests your ability to understand context, rather than just raw memorization. I am excited to help you unlock the secrets to reading like a test maker, making those intimidating sentences much easier to navigate. Get comfortable, focus your mind, and let us prepare to conquer the verbal section together. Building a robust vocabulary is one of the most fundamental steps in preparing for the GRE verbal section. However, trying to blindly memorize thousands of flashcards is usually a very frustrating and inefficient way to study. Instead, you need to learn how to acquire high-frequency GRE words strategically, focusing on the specific words that actually appear on the exam year after year. The test makers have a distinct set of academic words they love to use, and learning this targeted list will give you the highest return on your study time. You always want to study smarter, not just harder. One of the most powerful strategies for expanding your vocabulary quickly is learning Latin and Greek word roots. A root is the core building block of a word, and knowing just one root can help you accurately guess the meaning of a dozen different words. For example, the Latin root pac means peace. Once you know this, you can easily understand that pacify means to bring peace, and pacifist refers to someone who opposes war. This technique transforms vocabulary building from a memory game into a logical puzzle that is much easier for your brain to solve. Alongside roots, you should also pay close attention to prefixes and suffixes, which are the small word parts attached to the beginning or end of a root. Prefixes like un, in, or anti almost always reverse the meaning of a word, turning a positive word into a negative one. Suffixes often tell you the part of speech, helping you figure out if a word is acting as a noun, an adjective, or a verb within a sentence. Recognizing these tiny structural pieces can often save you on test day when you encounter a word you have never seen before. You can literally break unknown words apart to decode their meaning. Another vital vocabulary strategy is learning words in context rather than in isolation. When you encounter a new GRE word, do not just memorize its dictionary definition, but instead read several sentences that use the word naturally. This helps your brain understand the specific tone and flavor of the word, which is exactly what the GRE is testing. Some words have positive connotations, while others with similar definitions have highly negative connotations. Understanding these subtle emotional shades of meaning is often the key to selecting the correct answer on complex questions. Now let us apply this vocabulary knowledge to the first major question type you will face, which is text completion. These questions present you with a short passage containing 1, 2, or 3 blank spaces, and you must select the best words to fill in those blanks. The passages can range from a single sentence to a short paragraph, covering topics from science to history to literature. While they might look like simple fill-in-the-blank grammar exercises, they are actually testing your logical reasoning. You have to find the missing puzzle pieces that make the entire paragraph logically sound. The absolute golden rule for solving text completion questions is that the sentence always contains a clue that tells you exactly what the missing word must mean. The test makers are not allowed to make the answer a random guess, so they must embed a definition, a synonym, or an antonym directly into the surrounding text. Your primary job is to act like a detective and find that specific textual clue before you even look at the answer choices. If you try to plug the answers in before finding the clue, your brain will easily be tricked by trap words that sound good but are logically incorrect. Once you find the clue in the sentence, your next step is to come up with your own word for the blank, which we call a target word. This target word does not need to be a fancy GRE vocabulary word, it just needs to be a simple, plain English word that logically fits the sentence. By generating your own target word first, you create a mental shield against the trap answers designed by the test makers. You can then look at the given answer choices and simply find the one that best matches your simple target. This proactive strategy dramatically increases your accuracy and prevents second guessing. To find these clues accurately, you must learn to identify structural signposts, which are transition words that dictate the direction of the sentence. Words like although, however, despite, and ironically are contrast transitions. They tell you that the second half of the sentence is going to express an idea that is opposite to the first half. If the first part of the sentence is highly positive, a contrast transition guarantees that the second part must be negative. Spotting these direction changes is often the most important step in decoding a difficult text completion question. Conversely, you will also encounter similarity transitions, such as furthermore, consequently, therefore, and because. These words indicate that the sentence is moving in a straight, predictable line, where the second half supports or continues the logic of the first half. If a sentence uses the word because, you know the blank must directly agree with the reason provided in the other clause. By mastering both contrast and similarity transitions, you can accurately map out the logical flow of any sentence, no matter how complex the vocabulary happens to be. Text completion questions become significantly more challenging when you face passages with 2 or 3 blanks. In these multi-blank questions, you do not get partial credit, meaning you must select the correct word for every single blank to earn the point. This can feel intimidating, but the strategy remains exactly the same as a single blank question. You still need to hunt for clues and transition words to map out the logic of the entire paragraph. The trick is realizing that the blanks often relate to each other, so solving one blank usually helps you unlock the rest. When tackling a double or triple blank question, you should almost never try to solve the blanks in order from left to right. Instead, you need to scan the entire passage and start with the blank that has the most obvious clue attached to it. Sometimes the easiest blank to solve is the very last one in the paragraph, simply because it summarizes the entire passage. Once you lock in that easiest blank, the logical structure of the sentence becomes much clearer, making the remaining blanks far easier to solve. Always attack the weakest point in the paragraph first. A very common mistake students make on text completion questions is relying entirely on how a sentence sounds when read aloud. The test makers intentionally design incorrect answer choices that are grammatically perfect and sound incredibly natural to the ear. However, these trap answers will slightly alter the logical meaning of the sentence, making them completely incorrect in the context of the GRE. This is why you must rely on strict logic, transition words, and textual clues rather than your intuitive sense of phrasing. Always ask yourself if the word makes logical sense, not just grammatical sense. Managing your time efficiently during text completion questions is absolutely critical for success on the verbal section. You should aim to spend about 1 minute on single blank questions, and up to 2 minutes on complex triple blank questions. If you find yourself staring at a question for more than 2 minutes without making progress, you need to make an educated guess, mark the question, and move forward. Getting bogged down on one difficult vocabulary question can steal the time you need to answer 3 easier reading comprehension questions later in the section. Keep your momentum moving forward at all times. When you are forced to make a guess, using the process of elimination is your best weapon. Even if you do not know the exact meaning of every word in the answer choices, you can often eliminate words based on their prefixes, suffixes, or general emotional tone. If you know the blank requires a negative word, you can safely cross out any answers that you know are generally positive. Eliminating just 1 or 2 bad answers significantly increases your statistical odds of guessing correctly. Never leave a question blank, as there is absolutely no penalty for guessing on the GRE. You also need to be cautious of common words that have secondary, less familiar meanings. The GRE loves to use simple words in ways you might not expect. For example, the word flag usually means a banner, but on the GRE, it can be used as a verb meaning to lose energy or become tired. If you see a simple word in a complex sentence, pause and ask yourself if it might be operating under a secondary definition. Expanding your awareness of these alternate definitions will save you from falling into very common test traps. Do not ignore the punctuation marks in text completion passages, as they often serve as powerful logical clues. A colon or a semicolon acts very much like a similarity transition, telling you that the second half of the sentence will define or expand upon the first half. If a blank appears right after a colon, you can almost guarantee that the textual clue is sitting right before the colon. Paying attention to these structural punctuation marks gives you a massive advantage when the vocabulary becomes difficult to interpret. Punctuation acts as a map that guides you directly to the correct answer. To master these reading skills, you need to practice them daily in short, focused bursts. Rather than studying vocabulary for 3 hours on a Sunday, spend 20 minutes every single day reviewing roots and practicing text completion questions. This consistent, daily exposure forces your brain to move these words and logical patterns from short-term memory into long-term retention. Repetition is the mother of learning, especially when it comes to absorbing the unique style and rhythm of GRE sentences. Make this brief practice a non-negotiable part of your daily routine. Finally, approach the verbal section with a mindset of curiosity rather than frustration. When you encounter a word you do not know, treat it as an opportunity to learn a new puzzle piece, rather than a sign of failure. The GRE verbal section is difficult for everyone, even native English speakers, because it tests academic logic rather than everyday conversation. By remaining calm, trusting your structural strategies, and systematically hunting for clues, you can confidently navigate even the most intimidating vocabulary questions. You have the tools, and now you just need to apply them methodically. Congratulations on completing the second section of our GRE course and taking a massive step toward mastering verbal reasoning. I strongly encourage you to complete the practice test attached to this lesson right away. Completing practice questions improves your long-term retention and guarantees your overall exam readiness by testing your new skills in a realistic environment. Please remember that the practice test is included with this lesson specifically to help you solidify these strategies. I encourage active learning, so grab a pen and start hunting for those sentence clues today. You are doing a fantastic job, and I will see you in the next section where we tackle advanced reading comprehension. Welcome to the third section of our complete GRE exam prep course, where we tackle advanced verbal reasoning and reading comprehension. In this lesson, you will learn how to actively read dense academic passages and conquer tricky sentence equivalence questions with total confidence. Mastering these advanced topics is essential because reading comprehension makes up a massive portion of the verbal section, and controlling it is the key to a top score. I am thrilled to share these highly effective reading strategies that will completely transform the way you look at difficult texts. Get ready to sharpen your analytical mind as we dive into the most challenging parts of the verbal exam. Before we jump into the long reading passages, let us first master a unique question type called sentence equivalence. These questions look very similar to the text completion questions we studied in the last section, but they come with a major twist. You are given one sentence with a single blank space, but you must select exactly 2 answer choices from a list of 6. The catch is that both words must successfully fill the blank and produce 2 finished sentences that mean exactly the same thing. This question type tests both your vocabulary and your ability to recognize perfectly synonymous relationships. The most effective strategy for sentence equivalence is to pair up the answer choices before you even look deeply at the sentence. Because the 2 correct words must create identical sentences, they almost always have to be synonyms of each other. If you scan the 6 answer choices and find 2 pairs of synonyms, you instantly narrow your options down and eliminate the 2 random standalone words. This technique turns a complex vocabulary test into a simple matching game that you can often solve in seconds. Finding those pairs is your very first line of defense. However, you must be careful because the test makers will often include a trap pair of synonyms in the answer choices. These trap words will mean the exact same thing as each other, but they will not logically fit the context of the sentence. This is why you must still rely on the structural clues and transition words we discussed previously. You should form your own simple target word for the blank first, and then look for the pair of synonyms that matches your prediction. A word pair is only correct if it satisfies both the synonym rule and the sentence logic. Now let us transition to the largest and most intimidating part of the verbal section, which is reading comprehension. You will face a variety of passages ranging from a single paragraph to several dense paragraphs covering history, science, literature, or sociology. The GRE uses academic writing that is intentionally dry, complex, and full of dense jargon to test your focus and endurance. Your goal is not to become an expert on the topic, but rather to understand how the author built their argument. Reading for structure is vastly more important than reading for facts. To succeed in reading comprehension, you must completely abandon the passive reading habits you use when reading a novel or a news article. Passive reading involves letting the words wash over you while you hope to absorb the main idea. On the GRE, you must practice active reading, which means constantly asking yourself why the author wrote each specific sentence. You need to interrogate the text, looking for the underlying argument rather than just memorizing the tiny details. Active reading keeps your brain highly engaged and prevents you from having to reread the same paragraph 3 times. The most critical piece of information you need to extract from any passage is the primary purpose or main idea. Every single GRE passage is written to convey one central argument, whether it is introducing a new scientific theory, critiquing a historical viewpoint, or resolving a debate. You should mentally summarize the main idea in one simple sentence as soon as you finish reading the text. If you can clearly articulate why the author wrote the passage, you will easily answer a large percentage of the questions. The main idea is the anchor that holds all the details together. Alongside the main idea, you must closely monitor the author's tone throughout the passage. Tone refers to the author's attitude toward the subject matter, which can range from highly enthusiastic to deeply critical, or simply objective and neutral. You can identify the tone by paying attention to the specific adjectives and adverbs the author chooses to use. For example, if an author calls a theory groundbreaking, their tone is supportive, but if they call it questionable, their tone is skeptical. Recognizing this attitude helps you immediately eliminate answer choices that do not match the author's personal viewpoint. For longer passages, it is incredibly helpful to create a mental map or jot down a few quick notes on your scratch paper. You do not want to write down specific dates or facts, but rather the structural function of each paragraph. For instance, your map might simply say that paragraph 1 introduces a problem, paragraph 2 offers a traditional solution, and paragraph 3 presents the author's new alternative. This structural map allows you to quickly locate specific details when a question asks about them later. It saves you from helplessly skimming the entire text over and over again while the clock is ticking. When you encounter a specific detail question, you must always return to the passage and find the exact sentence that contains the answer. The GRE will often try to trick you by offering answer choices that sound true in the real world, but are not actually stated in the text. Your outside knowledge is a liability here, so you must strictly prove your answer using only the words provided by the author. If you cannot point your finger at the specific line in the passage that supports your answer, you are likely falling for a trap. Stick rigidly to the provided text. Inference questions are slightly more difficult because they ask you to identify a claim that is not explicitly stated, but must be true based on the passage. An inference on the GRE is not a wild guess or a creative leap of faith. It is a logical deduction that is directly supported by the evidence in the text, much like a mathematical proof. The correct answer will often be a simple restatement of a fact presented in the passage, just worded in a slightly different way. Keep your inferences incredibly small and tightly bound to the author's exact words. One of the most reliable ways to eliminate incorrect answers in reading comprehension is to spot extreme language. The test makers love to use words like always, never, all, only, or must in their trap answer choices. Because academic writing is usually cautious and nuanced, an author will rarely make such absolute, sweeping claims. Therefore, any answer choice containing extreme language is almost always incorrect unless the passage uses that exact same extreme word. Learning to instantly cross out these extreme answers will drastically improve your guessing odds and save you valuable time. You will also face a unique question format where you must click on a specific sentence within the passage that fulfills a certain function. For example, the question might ask you to select the sentence that provides evidence for the author's main conclusion. For these select in passage questions, you must evaluate the structural role of each sentence in the targeted area. Ask yourself if the sentence is a claim, an example, a transition, or a conclusion. By understanding the job that each sentence performs, you can quickly click on the exact line the test makers are looking for. Another challenging format is the multiple choice question that allows you to select one, two, or all three of the given answer choices. These questions do not give partial credit, so you must evaluate each choice independently as if it were a true or false question. Do not let the answer choices influence each other or try to find a pattern. Simply read the first option, check the passage to see if it is perfectly true, and then move on to the next one. This systematic approach prevents you from overthinking and ensures you only select choices strictly supported by the text. Sometimes, reading comprehension questions will ask you for the meaning of a specific word as it is used in the passage. These vocabulary in context questions are tricky because the word will almost always have a common everyday meaning, but the passage will use its secondary, academic definition. You must ignore the standard definition you already know and rely entirely on the context clues surrounding the word in the text. Treat the targeted word as a blank space and use the text completion strategies you already learned to figure out what it must mean. The surrounding text always provides the answer. You will also encounter a few short, single-paragraph passages that act as logical reasoning puzzles. These critical reasoning questions might ask you to identify the underlying assumption of an argument, find a piece of evidence that strengthens a claim, or find a flaw that weakens it. To solve these, you must first break the argument down into its two core components, which are the conclusion and the supporting evidence. The gap between the given evidence and the final conclusion is exactly where the assumption lives. Finding that hidden assumption is the absolute key to solving almost all logic-based questions. When a question asks you to strengthen or weaken an argument, you're essentially looking for an answer choice that impacts the author's hidden assumption. If you want to weaken the argument, you find an answer choice that attacks or invalidates that assumption. If you want to strengthen the argument, you find an answer choice that proves the assumption is actually true. You are never attacking the evidence itself, because the evidence on the GRE is always considered factual. You are only attacking the author's logic and how they attempted to connect their evidence to their final conclusion. Time management is absolutely crucial during the reading comprehension sections of the exam. Many students make the critical mistake of reading the passage too slowly, trying to memorize every single detail, which leaves them with no time to actually answer the questions. You should aim to read a passage in about 2 to 3 minutes, focusing only on the main idea and the overall structure. You can then spend about 1 minute on each question, returning to the text to hunt for specific details only when requested. This skimming approach ensures you get through all the material before the clock runs out. Finally, dealing with dense reading passages requires strong mental stamina and a highly positive mindset. It is very easy to become bored or frustrated when reading about an obscure topic like 19th century farming techniques. However, if you tell yourself the topic is boring, your brain will naturally stop absorbing the information. You must force yourself to feign interest and pretend that this is the most fascinating article you have ever read. This simple psychological trick forces your brain to stay fully engaged, helping you catch the subtle clues and structural shifts that lead to correct answers. Congratulations on completing the third section of our course and mastering these advanced reading strategies. I strongly encourage you to complete the practice test attached to this lesson right away. Practice questions improve your retention and overall exam readiness by forcing your brain to actively use its new skills. Please remember that the practice test is included with this lesson specifically for this purpose, so take full advantage of it. I highly encourage active learning, so jump into those reading passages today. You are making phenomenal progress, and I will naturally transition into our next section, where we will tackle quantitative reasoning fundamentals. Welcome to the fourth section of our complete GRE exam prep course, where we transition to the math portion of the exam by mastering quantitative reasoning fundamentals and geometry. In this lesson, you are going to refresh your memory on the essential rules of arithmetic, algebra, and geometry that you probably have not seen since high school. Understanding these core concepts is incredibly important because they form the foundational building blocks for every single math question on the test. I am very excited to help you dust off those math skills and build the confidence you need to solve equations quickly. Get ready, grab a pencil, and let us dive into the world of GRE math. The first thing you need to know about the GRE quantitative reasoning section is that it does not test advanced math like calculus or trigonometry. Instead, it strictly tests middle school and high school concepts like basic arithmetic, algebra, geometry, and data analysis. The difficulty comes from how the test makers disguise simple concepts inside tricky, logically complex word problems. Therefore, your goal is not to learn brand new, highly advanced math, but rather to master the basics so thoroughly that you can spot them in any disguise. A rock-solid foundation is your best defense against test-maker tricks. We will begin our review with the most fundamental building blocks of arithmetic, which are integers. An integer is simply any whole number, whether it is positive, negative, or zero. It is extremely important to remember that 0 is considered an even integer, and negative numbers follow the exact same even and odd rules as positive numbers. The GRE loves to test your knowledge of how even and odd numbers behave when you add or multiply them together. Memorizing these simple interaction rules will save you precious time on test day. Next, you must firmly grasp the order of operations, commonly remembered by the acronym PEMDAS. This rule tells you the exact order in which to solve a complex math problem. Parentheses, exponents, multiplication and division, followed by addition and subtraction. Many students make simple calculation errors because they read a math problem from left to right like a book, instead of following the strict PEMDAS hierarchy. Always take a moment to scan the entire equation and identify which operation you must perform first. This simple habit prevents careless mistakes that cost you easy points. Working with fractions is another essential skill that appears heavily throughout the quantitative section. A fraction simply represents a part of a whole, with the top number called the numerator and the bottom number called the denominator. When you add or subtract fractions, you must always find a common denominator first, which means making the bottom numbers match. However, when you multiply fractions, you simply multiply straight across the top and straight across the bottom, making it much easier. Remembering the difference between these two processes is vital for moving quickly through calculations. Decimals and percentages are just different ways of expressing the exact same concept as a fraction. The word percent literally means per 100, so 50% is exactly the same as 50 over 100, or the decimal point 5. You must be able to convert smoothly between fractions, decimals, and percentages in your head, because the GRE will frequently mix them within a single question. Learning the common conversions, like knowing that 1/5 equals 20%, will dramatically increase your calculation speed. Being fluent in these three languages of math is a massive advantage. Let us transition into algebra, which is essentially the process of finding an unknown number, usually represented by the letter x. The absolute golden rule of basic algebra is balance, meaning whatever operation you perform on one side of the equal sign, you must also perform in the exact same way on the other side. If you add 5 to the left side, you must add 5 to the right side to keep the equation perfectly balanced. Your primary goal in any algebraic equation is to isolate the variable by slowly peeling away the numbers surrounding it. Slow, methodical steps are much better than rushing and making an arithmetic error. You will also encounter exponents, which are just a shorthand way of writing repeated multiplication. For example, 3 to the power of 4 simply means multiplying the number 3 by itself 4 times in a row. The GRE frequently tests your ability to combine exponents, so you must memorize the core exponent rules. When you multiply two identical base numbers together, you simply add their exponents, and when you divide them, you subtract their exponents. These shortcut rules allow you to solve massive, scary-looking exponent problems in just a few seconds without a calculator. Negative and zero exponents often confuse students, but they follow very strict and simple rules. Any number raised to the power of 0 is always exactly 1, no matter how large the original number was. A negative exponent, on the other hand, does not create a negative number, but rather tells you to flip the number into a fraction. For example, 2 to the power of negative 3 becomes 1 over 2 to the power of positive 3. Understanding these quirky exponent rules allows you to quickly simplify complicated equations that look completely impossible at first glance. Roots and radicals are the direct opposite of exponents, and square roots are the most common type you will see on the exam. A square root simply asks you to find the number that, when multiplied by itself, produces the number inside the root symbol. While you can use the on-screen calculator for difficult roots, you should memorize the perfect squares up to 15, such as knowing that the square root of 144 is 12. Being able to recognize these perfect squares instantly will save you from constantly reaching for the calculator. Now let us shift our focus to geometry, starting with the most basic elements, which are lines and angles. A straight line always measures exactly 180 degrees, and a full circle measures 360 degrees. When two straight lines intersect, they create vertical angles opposite each other, which are always perfectly equal in measurement. The GRE loves to draw complex, messy diagrams with intersecting lines and ask you to find a missing angle. By simply looking for straight lines and vertical angles, you can easily unravel these visual puzzles. Triangles are the absolute most tested geometric shape on the entire exam, so you must know their properties perfectly. The most important rule to remember is that the three inside angles of any triangle will always add up to exactly 180 degrees. A right triangle is a special type of triangle that contains one perfect 90-degree angle, often marked by a small square in the corner. For right triangles, you can always use the Pythagorean theorem, which states that the square of the two shorter sides added together equals the square of the longest side. To save time on right triangle questions, you should memorize the most common side length ratios, known as Pythagorean triples. The two most frequent triples tested on the GRE are the 3-4-5 triangle and the 5-12-13 triangle. If you see a right triangle with a short side of 3 and a longest side of 5, you instantly know the missing side is 4 without doing any math. The test makers use these specific ratios constantly, so recognizing them immediately is a fantastic shortcut. This is one of the easiest ways to buy yourself extra time on the math section. Circles are another very common geometry topic, and you only need to memorize two fundamental formulas to solve almost any circle problem. The distance around the outside of the circle is the circumference, which is calculated by multiplying the diameter by pi. The space inside the circle is the area, which is calculated by multiplying pi by the radius squared. The radius is just the distance from the center to the edge, and the diameter is the distance completely across. If you know the radius, you hold the golden key to finding absolutely any other measurement of that circle. Rectangles and squares are four-sided shapes, or quadrilaterals, that are heavily tested for perimeter and area. The perimeter is simply the total distance around the outside edge, found by adding all four sides together. The area is the flat space inside the shape, found by multiplying the length by the width. The GRE will often combine these shapes, perhaps placing a circle inside a square, and ask you to find the area of the remaining space. You solve these complex figures by simply finding the area of the large shape and subtracting the area of the small shape. You might also see questions involving larger polygons, which are simply closed shapes with straight sides, like a pentagon or a hexagon. The only major formula you need for these larger shapes is the interior angle formula, which tells you the total sum of all the inside angles. You take the total number of sides, subtract 2, and then multiply that number by 180. This formula works perfectly for any polygon, regardless of how many sides it has. It is a very simple formula to memorize, but it is impossible to guess if you forget it on test day. Coordinate geometry introduces the x and y plane, which is a grid used to map points and lines. The horizontal line is the x-axis, and the vertical line is the y-axis, meeting in the middle at a point called the origin. Every point on this grid is identified by a set of coordinates written in parentheses, with the x value always listed first and the y value second. The GRE will test your ability to plot points, find the distance between them, and understand the general direction of a line moving across the grid. Always draw a quick sketch of the grid on your scratch paper to visualize the problem clearly. The most heavily tested concept in coordinate geometry is the slope of a straight line, which measures how steep it is. Slope is often defined as rise over run, meaning the change in the vertical direction divided by the change in the horizontal direction. A line that points upward from left to right has a positive slope, while a line pointing downward has a negative slope. You can often eliminate half of the answer choices on a slope question just by looking at the line and identifying whether it is positive or negative. A quick visual check is your best friend in coordinate geometry. Before we end this section, it is crucial to mention a unique math question format called quantitative comparison. These questions give you two distinct quantities, labeled quantity A and quantity B, and ask you to determine which one is larger. The answer choices are always exactly the same. A is greater, B is greater, they are equal, or the relationship cannot be determined. These questions require a completely different mindset, as you often do not need to calculate an exact answer, but simply compare the relative sizes. We will practice this specific strategy heavily as we move forward. Congratulations on completing the fourth section of our course and reviewing the essential fundamentals of quantitative reasoning and geometry. I strongly encourage you to complete the practice test attached to this lesson right away to solidify these math rules in your mind. Practice questions improve your retention and overall exam readiness by forcing you to apply these formulas to realistic word problems. Please remember that the practice test is included with this lesson specifically for your benefit, so embrace the active learning process. End this session positively, take a well-deserved break, and I will see you in the next section where we tackle advanced quantitative reasoning and data analysis. Welcome to the fifth section of our complete GRE exam prep course, where we dive into advanced quantitative reasoning and data analysis. In this lesson, you are going to learn how to tackle complex probability, combinatorics, statistics, and data interpretation questions with absolute confidence. Mastering these advanced math topics is essential because they frequently make up the difference between a good score and a truly top-tier score. I am very excited to help you demystify these intimidating concepts and show you the simple shortcuts test makers use. Get ready to sharpen your analytical tools as we explore the upper levels of GRE math. We will begin with the study of statistics, focusing specifically on averages, which are formally known as the arithmetic mean. The mean is calculated by taking the sum of all the numbers in a set and dividing that total by the total count of numbers. The GRE loves to test your understanding of the mean by giving you the average and the count, forcing you to work backward to find the hidden sum. If you know that 5 numbers have an average of 20, you instantly know their total sum is 100. Remembering that sum equals average multiplied by count is a massive time-saving shortcut. Alongside the mean, you must also understand the median and the mode, which are two other ways of describing data sets. The median is simply the exact middle number when you arrange all the numbers in order from least to greatest. If a data set has an even amount of numbers, the median is the average of the two middle numbers. The mode is simply the number that appears most frequently in the set, though a set can have multiple modes or no mode at all. The test makers frequently compare the mean and median to trick your intuition, so always write the data points out clearly. Another vital statistical concept is standard deviation, which measures how spread out a set of numbers is from the average. A very small standard deviation means the numbers are clustered tightly around the mean, while a large standard deviation means the numbers are spread widely apart. You will never be asked to calculate a complex standard deviation by hand on the GRE. Instead, You just need to understand the conceptual meaning, recognizing that extreme outlier numbers will dramatically increase the standard deviation. Grasping this concept conceptually is all you need to score points on these questions. Next, let us explore counting methods, starting with the fundamental counting principle, which is the bedrock of combinatorics. If a task can be broken down into multiple independent sequential steps, you simply multiply the number of options for each step to find the total combinations. For example, if you have 3 shirts and 4 pairs of pants, you multiply 3 by 4 to get 12 possible outfits. This simple multiplication rule applies to everything from license plate numbers to password creation. Always look for independent choices and multiply their possibilities together. When the order of selection matters, we use permutations to calculate the total number of arrangements. A permutation is a specific arrangement of items where sequence is critically important, such as the order of a first, second, and third place finish in a race. If you are picking 3 winners out of 10 runners, you multiply 10 by 9 by 8 to find the total possible arrangements. Permutations are essentially just a series of multiplication steps governed by the fundamental counting principle. Recognizing when order matters is the key to unlocking these problems. Conversely, when the order of selection does not matter at all, we use combinations to calculate our groups. A combination is a collection of items where picking person A then person B is considered identical to picking person B then person A. Think of forming a committee of 3 people from a pool of 10, where everyone holds the exact same rank. Because the order of selection creates duplicate groups, you must take your permutation result and divide it by the factorial of the chosen size to eliminate those duplicates. Mastering combinations prevents you from wildly overcounting your possibilities. Probability is the mathematical study of how likely it is that a specific event will happen. The probability of any event is always expressed as a fraction, with the number of successful outcomes placed on the top and the total possible outcomes placed on the bottom. A probability of 0 means an event is completely impossible, while a probability of 1 means the event is a guaranteed certainty. The GRE will often ask you to find the probability of multiple independent events happening together, which you solve by calculating their individual probabilities and multiplying them. Never let complicated wording confuse this simple fraction rule. Word problems are a massive component of the quantitative section, often testing your ability to translate English sentences into mathematical equations. The most common type of word problem involves rates, speed, and time, which are governed by the golden distance formula. Distance equals rate multiplied by time, meaning if you drive 60 miles per hour for 2 hours, you travel 120 miles. The test makers love to create complex scenarios involving 2 trains moving toward each other or people working together to complete a task. Breaking these complex stories down into simple algebra is your best strategy. For work rate problems, where 2 people complete a job together at different speeds, you must use the individual rate method. Instead of adding their times together, which is a very common trap, you must add their individual rates of work per hour. If Alice can paint a room in 2 hours, her rate is 1/2 of the room per hour, and if Bob takes 3 hours, his rate is 1/3 per hour. Adding their hourly rates together gives you their combined power, allowing you to easily find the total time needed to finish the job. Always think in terms of work per single unit of time. Overlapping sets are another fascinating word problem format that can be easily solved using a simple matrix or a Venn diagram. These problems typically involve groups of people where some members belong to category A, some to category B, some to both, and some to neither. To solve these without getting confused, you simply use the double set matrix method, filling in the given numbers step by step. Alternatively, you can use the overarching set formula, which states that the total equals group A plus group B minus both, plus neither. Visualizing the data makes these complex puzzles remarkably simple. Data interpretation questions make up a dedicated cluster of questions on the GRE, usually tied to a specific set of charts or graphs. You will be asked to analyze bar charts, line graphs, pie charts, scatter plots, and frequency distributions to answer a series of questions. The most important rule for data interpretation is to read the chart titles, axis labels, and tiny footnotes very carefully. The test makers deliberately hide crucial units of measurement in the fine print, hoping to catch students who rush. Slowing down to read the labels is the absolute secret to mastering these visual questions. When tackling data interpretation graphs, you should avoid doing heavy, unnecessary calculations whenever possible. The test makers often design the charts with clear visual proportions, allowing you to estimate answers or use the process of elimination. If a question asks for a rough percentage increase, a quick visual glance at the bar heights will often let you eliminate 3 obviously wrong answer choices immediately. Use your eyes as much as your calculator to save precious seconds. Approximation is a legitimate mathematical tool on standardized tests. You will also encounter data interpretation questions that require you to synthesize information across multiple different charts or tables. For instance, a question might ask you to take total revenue from a pie chart in Figure 1 and calculate a percentage based on regional growth data found in Figure 2. This requires you to keep a clear, organized map of your intermediate numbers on your scratch paper to avoid making careless arithmetic errors. Double-checking your intermediate steps ensures that a single misplaced decimal point does not ruin your final answer. Organization is your shield against complex data flows. Quantitative comparison questions, which we introduced in the previous section, frequently incorporate advanced topics like statistics, probability, and geometry. Remember that your primary goal in these questions is not to find a precise numerical value, but to determine the relative size of quantity A versus quantity B. Often, you can test a few easy numbers, like 0, 1, or negative fractions, to see if the relationship changes under different mathematical conditions. If quantity A is larger in one scenario, but quantity B is larger in another, the answer must automatically be that the relationship cannot be determined. Strategic guessing and picking numbers are powerful advanced tools for when you get completely stuck on a complex algebraic word problem. If a question uses variables throughout the answer choices, you are legally allowed to plug in your own simple, convenient numbers for those variables. For example, if a question talks about an original price and a 20% discount, simply plug in $100 as your starting price. Doing the math with real, concrete numbers is almost always faster and less confusing than manipulating abstract algebraic variables. Let your intuition guide you through the arithmetic. The process of elimination is just as important in the math section as it is in the verbal section, especially for complex multiple-choice questions. If you can calculate that an answer must be greater than 50, you can instantly cross out any answer choices that fall below that threshold. Narrowing your options down from 5 choices to 2 gives you a 50% chance of guessing correctly if you run out of time. Never underestimate the power of systematically eliminating impossible answers. It is a hallmark of high-scoring test takers. Time management during the quantitative section requires a ruthless commitment to moving forward when a problem becomes a roadblock. You will face 22 questions in each math section, giving you roughly 1.5 to 2 minutes per question on average. If you spend 5 minutes fighting with a single stubborn probability question, you will be forced to rush blindly through the final 5 questions. If a math problem feels like a bottomless pit of confusion, make an educated guess, mark it for review, and bounce to the next question. Protecting your time is vital for maximizing your score. Maintaining high mental energy through the final quantitative sections requires discipline and steady, calm pacing. It is completely normal to feel a bit of mental fatigue as you approach the end of the test, but this is precisely when careless errors happen. Take a 5-second mental pause, roll your shoulders back, take a deep breath, and refocus your eyes on the screen before tackling the last few problems. Treating every single question as an isolated puzzle helps you stay fresh and sharp all the way to the final buzzer. Finish your math journey with total confidence in your preparation. Congratulations on completing the 5th section of our GRE course and conquering advanced quantitative reasoning and data analysis. I strongly encourage you to complete the practice test attached to this lesson right away to lock in these complex math formulas. Practice questions improve your retention and overall exam readiness by forcing your brain to apply these statistical and combinatorial principles under realistic conditions. Please remember that the practice test is included with this lesson specifically to support your active learning journey. Keep up this phenomenal momentum, and I will see you in our final section where we master test day strategy and exam day logistics. Welcome to the final section of our complete GRE exam prep course, where we master test day strategy, pacing, and the adaptive nature of the exam. In this lesson, you are going to learn how the computer adjusts your sections, how to manage your time under pressure, and how to conquer test anxiety. Bringing all these pieces together is incredibly important because knowing the material is only half the battle of winning a top score. I am thrilled to celebrate your progress and help you cross the finish line with absolute confidence. Get ready, settle in, and let us map out your path to test day success. One of the most important concepts to master for test day is a deep understanding of the section-level adaptive format of the GRE. As we touched on earlier, the computer grades your performance on the first operational section of verbal or quantitative and adjusts the difficulty of the second section accordingly. This means your score is heavily dependent on how accurately you answer the questions in that very first section. You must treat the first verbal and first math sections with intense focus and absolute priority. Maximizing your early correct answers opens the door to the highest possible scoring tier. Because the test is adaptive within sections rather than question by question, you have the incredible freedom to move around within any given section. You do not have to answer questions in the exact order they appear on your screen, which is a massive strategic advantage. If you encounter a terrifying algebra word problem right at the beginning of the math section, you can simply click past it and come back to it later. Never let a single stubborn question steal your precious time when there are easier points waiting for you further down the list. Smart navigation is a hallmark of elite test takers. To take full advantage of this flexibility, you should use a multi-pass approach during every single test section. On your first pass through the section, you should answer every question that looks familiar and straightforward, while quickly marking and skipping anything that looks confusing. On your second pass, you return to the questions you marked and spend your remaining time working through them with care. This ensures that you never miss out on easy points simply because you ran out of time while fighting a difficult puzzle. Speed and triage are your best friends on exam day. The GRE software includes a built-in mark and review feature that allows you to flag any question with a simple click of a button. You can also view a review screen at the very end of the section that shows you which questions you answered, which ones are incomplete, and which ones you flagged. You should make it a strict habit to check this review screen before your timer runs out, just to ensure you did not accidentally leave a blank space. Every single question on the GRE must be answered, since there is zero penalty for guessing incorrectly. Never leave an empty box behind. Time management is arguably the single most important tactical skill you will deploy on exam day. In both the verbal and quantitative sections, you average roughly 1.5 to 2 minutes per question, but some questions will naturally take 30 seconds while others take 3 minutes. You must monitor your pacing by checking the on-screen clock at regular intervals, such as halfway through the allotted time. If you notice you are falling dangerously behind schedule, you must speed up your decision-making and start making educated guesses on the toughest items. Keeping a steady rhythm prevents panic. Mental endurance and fatigue management are also critical factors during a high-stakes test that lasts nearly 2 hours. Even though the modern GRE is shorter than past versions, maintaining intense cognitive focus for that long requires real stamina. You can build this stamina during your preparation by taking full-length practice tests under authentic, timed conditions without distractions. Treating your practice exams like the real event trains your brain to stay sharp when fatigue normally tries to creep in. Preparation cures anxiety because familiarity breeds comfort. Test anxiety is a very common challenge that affects even the most brilliant students, but it can be managed with simple psychological techniques. When anxiety flares up and your heart starts racing during the exam, pause for 5 seconds and take a slow, deep breath from your diaphragm. This physiological reset instantly signals your nervous system to calm down, clearing your mind so you can return to logical thinking. Remind yourself that a single difficult question does not define your entire score, and simply move on to the next challenge. You are in control of your reactions. On the logistics front, you must plan your test day schedule down to the smallest detail to avoid unnecessary stress. Whether you are taking the exam at a designated testing center or securely at home through online proctoring, check your requirements days in advance. Make sure you have your required government-issued identification documents ready, your scratch paper prepared, and your travel route planned out if you are going to a center. Eliminating last-minute surprises ensures that your mental energy is reserved entirely for the exam itself, rather than wasted on administrative panic. If you are taking the test at a physical testing center, arrive at least 30 minutes before your scheduled appointment time to check in comfortably. You will go through security procedures, including ID checks and digital fingerprinting, so give yourself plenty of cushion so you never feel rushed. Keep in mind that testing centers can sometimes be cold, so wearing layers of comfortable clothing is a very smart tactical choice. You want your physical comfort to be completely dialed in so you can focus exclusively on your academic performance. During the brief moments between sections, take a moment to roll your shoulders, stretch your fingers, and mentally wipe the slate clean. Do not sit there dwelling on a difficult math question from the previous section that you think you might have missed. Dwelling on past mistakes is a toxic habit that completely ruins your focus for the upcoming section, where you need your mind clear and sharp. Treat every new section as a brand new game with a clean score sheet. Resilience and short-term memory loss for past errors are powerful traits for success. Let us review how to handle the on-screen calculator during the quantitative sections, as it is a tool that trips many students up. The calculator is basic, meaning it performs standard arithmetic like addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, but it does not handle complex algebraic fractions automatically. You must use the calculator judiciously, only reaching for it when manual calculation is genuinely too difficult or prone to error. Relying on the calculator for simple math like multiplying 5 by 12 wastes precious seconds that add up quickly over a whole section. Balance your mental math with the tool. Another common pitfall on test day is misreading what the question is actually asking you to find. For example, a math problem might ask you to solve for 2x, but after working hard to find x equals 5, students instantly select 5 as the answer without multiplying it by 2. The test makers deliberately include this exact trap in their answer choices to catch students who rush. Always underline or mentally restate the final goal of the question before you lock in your final choice. Accuracy always beats blind speed. When reviewing your practice test results during your preparation phase, you should keep a detailed error log to track your weak spots. Do not just look at your score and move on, but instead analyze every single question you missed to understand where you got it wrong. Did you make a careless arithmetic error? Did you misunderstand a vocabulary word? Or did you fall for a classic test maker trap? Identifying the root cause of your mistakes ensures you never repeat them on a future exam. Your errors are your greatest teachers if you take the time to study them. As your test date approaches, you should gradually taper your heavy study hours to ensure your brain is fully rested and fresh. Cramming new information the night before the exam is a terrible strategy that only leads to mental exhaustion and high anxiety. Instead, spend your final days reviewing your error log, practicing a few light questions to keep your rhythm, and getting plenty of quality sleep. A well-rested brain performs exponentially better than an exhausted brain stuffed with last-minute facts. Trust the comprehensive preparation you have built over weeks of hard work. Remember that your GRE score is just one component of your overall graduate school application package, alongside your transcripts, letters of recommendation, and personal statement. While a high score certainly opens doors, a strong overall application tells a compelling story about who you are and what you plan to achieve. Approach the test with a balanced, healthy perspective that prioritizes your long-term academic and professional goals. You are stepping onto a path of continuous growth, and this exam is simply one milestone along your journey. Keep your eyes firmly fixed on your ultimate vision. The strategies you have learned throughout this entire course, from structural reading to systematic math problem solving, will serve you well beyond just this single test. The critical thinking, analytical writing, and rigorous reasoning skills you developed are foundational cognitive tools for success in demanding graduate programs. You have learned how to break down complex arguments, decode difficult texts, and approach quantitative problems with cool logic. These are lifelong skills that elevate your professional capabilities across any industry you choose to enter. You have invested in your own intellectual growth in a profound way. Take a moment right now to genuinely congratulate yourself on the dedication and hard work it took to complete this rigorous exam preparation course. Showing up consistently, pushing through difficult verbal passages, and mastering advanced math concepts requires real discipline and personal commitment. You have proven to yourself that you have the focus and grit required to tackle complex academic challenges. That kind of internal drive is the true secret ingredient behind every successful graduate student and future professional leader. Be proud of the intellectual effort you have poured into this journey. I strongly encourage you to complete the final comprehensive practice test attached to this lesson right away to test your complete exam readiness. Putting all your new skills together in a full-length simulation is the ultimate way to lock in your long-term retention and build bulletproof test day confidence. Please remember that this practice test is included right here with this lesson specifically to ensure you finish your training strong. Embrace active learning one last time, dive into the simulation, and prove to yourself just how far you have come since the very first day. You are fully equipped, completely prepared, and ready to dominate this exam. As we conclude this complete GRE exam prep course, I want to wish you the absolute best of luck on your upcoming exam and your future graduate studies. You have the knowledge, you have the strategies, and most importantly, you have the mindset needed to achieve your target score. Step into that testing room or sit down at your home computer with calm assurance, knowing you have done the hard work required to succeed. Go out there, execute your plan with precision, and achieve the incredible results you deserve. Goodbye for now, keep striving for excellence, and congratulations on an amazing job.